Have you ever washed someone's feet before? I don't mean giving your kids a bath, though I can see how that would apply. I mean washing their feet in the way that Jesus washed his disciples' feet at the Passover meal, which became the Last Supper before Jesus was arrested. I remember sometimes as a teenager in youth group, we would wash each other's feet when it was this time of year, Passover, and it being so awkward. Just the awkwardness of having someone wash your feet, the awkwardness of approaching someone else and washing their feet. But there's 2 times in my life where I've had the opportunity to wash feet, and that are really significant and have helped me develop my own understanding of what I believe Jesus is doing when he's washing the disciples' feet, and in a way that was still awkward and took a lot of humility, but in a way that helped me connect more to what this story and to what I think Jesus is calling us to. The first was when I was an intern at Valley Shepherd, which is in Meridian, Idaho, and I was just a college student at the time, and I was in the youth, one of the youth interns there. And I had a professor at NNU, and his name is Ed Robinson, and he was one of my favorite professors. And he was such a champion of me and believed in me and the pastor I was becoming, and the pastor I was even as an intern. And he was also part of the church at Valley Shepherd. And whenever I was speaking that night at youth group, I would be sure to tell Dr. Ed. I would run to his office and say, "Hey, I've been invited to speak at youth group tonight." And he said, "I'll be there." And every time I spoke, he was there rooting for me, and he was just so influential in my life. Well, one day I wasn't speaking, the youth pastor was, but we were doing a foot washing, and Dr. Ed was there. And the youth pastor said, if anyone, he gave this message on foot washing. He said, if anyone would be bold enough to come and have their feet washed, come here. And there was a foot washing station up front. And the only one in the room that was bold enough, humble enough, was Dr. Ed Robinson. And nobody moved. None of the teenagers felt comfortable enough to go up. And so I thought, well, I'm the intern. This is my job. But Dr. Ed just had meant so much to me that I went forward, and I remember washing his feet, and that's such a meaningful moment to me because I only knew him a couple years after that. Later, he wasn't a professor anymore. He became the vice president of academic affairs at NNU, and he got a new office, and he had you had to go through 2 secretaries to get to him. And I remember one day going to his office to try to stop by and I'm sure tell him something. He and I were friends, and the secretaries tried to deter me because he was very important now and had an important title, and I convinced them to let me through, and so I went to his office, and he welcomed me and was so excited that I had remembered him in his new position and stopped by, and he marched me back out to the secretaries and said, "This is Carlie, this is my friend, and if you see her, you just let her in no matter what," and just gave me open door, open arms to come and visit with him. Well, shortly after that, he was set to retire, and he died suddenly. And he just meant so much to me, and I'll always remember just how he was so humble and was my friend and loved me, and that I had the opportunity to wash his feet. That will always stand out to me. Even though it was awkward in the moment, I'm so glad that I had that opportunity. The other story is my college roommate, my sophomore year, and she was going through a hard time in her faith and in life, I would say. and she started getting into things that she would later regret. And she came to me one night and just started confessing all of these things that she was sad about and that she regretted doing. And I didn't know what to say. I didn't want her to think, I didn't want to start preaching at her. I didn't want her to think that I was somehow better than her. And also I knew that I couldn't just say, oh, it's okay, because it wasn't. So I just heard the Spirit prompting me, wash her feet. And so I didn't say anything else. I just got some foot washing, a bucket and a towel, and I just started washing her feet. And she was crying and I was emotional, and God did something in that moment without words, in that just service and humility and confession and receiving of confession in that moment. And that stands out to me today too, because she started having some better years in reconnecting with God and walking with God, but today she's not walking with God. And I look back on that moment and I just pray over the seeds that were planted there, and praying that the Lord would just draw him back to himself in his grace and in his love and in his washing of feet, but washing away of sins. So both of those stories were perhaps awkward in the moment, but they've deeply affected me. And every time that I hear the story of Jesus washing the disciples' feet, both of those stories stand out to me, because it wasn't just something that, you do because you're at youth group and that's what the pastor has asked you to do, but it's something that has a profound impact. And so this is the story of Jesus washing his disciples' feet, and it's from John 13, 1 through 15. I wanted to read it for you today. It says, before the Passover meal, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from the world to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Now when it was time for supper, the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, Simon Iscariot's son, to betray him. Jesus knew that the Father had given everything into his hands, that he had come from God, and that he was going back to God. So he got up from his supper, laid aside his outer clothing, took a towel and tied it around himself. Next he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet and to dry them with the towel tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who asked him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus answered him, what I'm doing you don't realize now, but afterward you will understand. You will never wash my feet, Peter said. Jesus replied, if I don't wash you, you have no part with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not only my feet, but also my heads and my hands. Once he was bathed, Jesus told him, one who is bathed, Jesus told him, doesn't need to wash anything except his feet, but he is completely clean. You are clean, but not all of you. For he knew who would betray him. This is why he said, not all of you are clean. When Jesus had washed their feet and put on his outer clothing, he reclined again and said to them, do you know what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are speaking rightly, since that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you should do just as I have done for you. I can't get through that story without thinking of Jesus knew who he was, the Son of God, Jesus Christ, the Lord, the Messiah, that he was about to go to the cross to die for our sins, to save us in our sin. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And he pauses and takes this moment first to wash his disciples' feet, all of them. Peter, who was going to deny him, the disciples who were going to desert him, Judas, who was going to betray him. Because it didn't matter who they were. It mattered who Jesus was and what he could do for them. And that Jesus took the form of this servant and humbled himself. Later, during that same dinner, the disciples clearly didn't get the message. They started arguing over who was greatest among them. And Jesus rebukes them. He tells them The kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who have authority over them have themselves called benefactors. It is not to be like that among you. On the contrary, whoever is great among you should become like the youngest, and whoever leads like the one serving. For who is greater, the one at the table or the one serving? Isn't it the one at the table? But I am among you as one who serves. That was Luke 22:24-27. Paul explains this in Philippians 2:5-7. This attitude of Jesus, he says, we should adopt the same attitude as that of Christ Jesus, who, existing in the form of God, did not consider equality with God as something to be exploited. Instead, he emptied himself by assuming the form of a servant, taking on the likeness of humanity. And that's what we are called to now and during Holy Week more than ever, to remember what Jesus has done for us and to become like him. He is our goal. He is our everything. And the more that we humble ourselves and become servants to others, not because of who they are or because of who we are, but because of who Jesus is. That is our calling as we look toward Jesus, going to the cross and stopping at this moment to humble himself and wash his disciples' feet. So this week, I challenge you to wash someone's feet, and maybe not literally, but maybe literally, or maybe just taking the form of a servant, serving someone in a way that requires humility on your part and grace, and in a way that they're not going to expect, in a way that tells someone, look, I love you, and I honor our friendship, or even someone. Maybe it's not a friend. Maybe it's someone who has deserted you or denied you or betrayed you, or who will. But it's not about that. It's about becoming more like Jesus every day, humbling ourselves like he did, and serving one another in love. God be with you today, and I'm praying for you and our church as we head into the rest of Holy Week. And we'll see you Friday and Sunday.